Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and it is the 23rd of May today, and we have if you want the weather report in my area, it's a little bit cloudy out right now. It is supposed to be a little bit stormy later today, so we'll see what shakes out. I actually don't mind a good thunderstorm. I think I had one during one of these live streams, where all of a sudden one just came in while I was doing this, which was kind of fun. But yeah, I've sort of woken up. I'm a little bit of I actually woke up probably on time this morning, but I was a little bit of a flurry because all of a sudden I was doing something and realized, at the last minute I've gotta get myself together to be on this live stream. So good morning and welcome. Like I said, I feel like there's going to be maybe more people watching this afterwards. And good morning, Sam. So there's I'm a little bit slightly discombobulated this morning, but I'm sure I will manage to get on track pretty quickly. Today, I think it's today I think it will be a day where the topic that had come to mind. I was doing some readings, and a lot of times the topics that I pick will come out of either things that have come out of either dreams or just things that have come out of when I do my connecting in the morning to my guides. I will usually something will come up, some kind of a topic that is not about me per se. It might include me. It might be, obviously, if I can give advice to people, I can take it too, right? What's this phrase? Practice what you preach. And I'm very well aware that for a lot of stuff that we talk about, that things can be easier said than done. Like, for example, it's easy to say something like, open your heart. It's easy to say something like, just let go of the past. And we all know that the reality is that if it was that easy, then we'd all done it already, right? So it's always a process to try to move through this kind of stuff. And good morning. We're just starting to talk about the kind of topics that I'm talking about today, and how hard it is to, when somebody tells you something that sounds very, very simple, like bring love into the situation, or let go of something, then we can all of a sudden just manage to we are just going to say it, and then therefore it just happens. I think probably when real fundamental change happens with somebody, when you've actually made the transition. Now frequently we get to a space where we know that we know something needs to change. We know that the situation we are in is not sustainable. We know there's something about it where we're either hitting a wall, or we're being drained of our energy, or something very toxic is going on. And then we say, okay, I need to do something different. And we may know this, and we may even take active steps in that direction and do things like that. But the bottom line is that still, the change still doesn't automatically come. One example that I can think of with this is when people would talk about, for instance, the idea, okay, if you follow Buddhist meditation or even Hindu, Vedic meditations or things like that, there's always this idea of nothingness, okay, of reaching a state, dealing with nothing. And that's something that is frequently misunderstood by people, because when we say nothing, we think, I remember Pope John Paul II at one point said, this very negative Eastern spirituality that says there's nothing. It's like, no, we're not saying there's nothing in the atheistic sense. What they're saying is that there's no thing. It's literally like a dash between the no and the thing. There's no thing. When you're talking about something that's an ultimate reality, it's not about things. It's not about matter. It's not about stuff. Okay, we tend to measure reality by stuff. When we do scientific experiments, it's based on very concrete material principles and things. Even if we're talking about stuff at the molecular level, you're talking about, you're still talking about matter. You're talking about stuff. And and it's interesting because I was listening to some discussions recently about dark matter and things like that, because they say most of the universe is made up of dark matter. But nobody really knows what that is, and people are even questioning whether or not that's a thing. There's been a lot more studies that I've been reading, and not from things that are kind of far out. From actual philosophers, engineers, material scientists, people like that, neurosurgeons, who have been talking about the idea that maybe we're measuring it wrong. Maybe we got it wrong. Maybe what we're looking at really are that we're actually living in rather than measuring everything by material laws of physics, rather than looking at things in terms of units of consciousness or things like that. I'm trying to say that even ideas like the holographic universe, the idea that actually plays very much into the Eastern idea of Maya, that this is all an illusion, right? And Joseph Campbell had done a lecture series at one time called East Meets West, and I have it recorded somewhere. I think I have it on my iPod actually, but it was an interesting series because, and again, this is one that I have my religion students listen to, because Campbell has said that the most successful religious systems are the ones that mirror what the science is. Whatever the standard for truth is the one that tends to be more successful. And certainly in the late 60s and in the 70s, Eastern philosophy became like a thing. Probably earlier than that, I want to say that when certain aspects of Eastern thought were introduced, probably by people even like as far back as Madame Blavatsky, the idea of introducing ideas of karma and samsara and things to us in the West, who were used to the Christian, or what we used to call Judeo-Christian. Some people hate that term these days, but anyway, the monotheistic way of looking at the way that life, death, making sense of life in a religious sense has always been interpreted in that lens. And what Campbell had pointed out was that there is a lot in Eastern thought that actually coincides with what science discovers. And it's the kind of things that we're talking about. For example, all of quantum mechanics actually comes out of Hinduism. It comes out of ideas of the Paramatman and things like that. Those were the models that Niels Bohr and his group were using when they were coming up with the concepts that connected to quantum mechanics and the uncertainty principle, Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and things like that, are all, this idea of matter at its most. I mean, really, they're looking at matter at like I said, at the quantum level, at the real energetic level, and not at the what we think of as the apparent level, right? The way that we see each other, because we are made up of molecules and things, but we don't perceive ourselves that way, right? You perceive yourself as a unified being, separate from others but unified. So there's this. So there's other ways of looking at things, and I think one of the reasons I fixate, like both here in my coaching practice and also in my school, because the school I'm going to be trying to start up this year, is mainly about trying to get people to think about things differently. And sometimes it's the most obvious things, but it's not that easy to let go of the old concepts, because that's your only framework for dealing with things. So the example I was going to give is when I met my guru in 2002. Okay, I think it was it 2001 or 2002? And I met her. It was post 9/11, because I remember when 9/11 happened, and I was working at the county library facility where I used to work, and that was Anyway, I don't want to derail into that, but that was a rather traumatic day. That was actually literally 2 weeks before I split from my husband, for good. When he moved out, and then I moved into my own place, and that was that. And it was actually quite a freeing thing. And I remember, everybody was afraid to go to New York City at that time. And initially, it was probably not a good idea because of all the dust and debris and everything settling. It was actually quite toxic down in the village and down that way. But I started going in. I just was like, you know what? I was literally starting a new life, and I was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to have fear. I'm going to go into the city every single damn weekend. I went in every weekend. I had joined certain groups, and I was in New York. But that time, it was actually cheaper to go to New York. Then good old Governor Chris Christie raised the rates to go to New York City. So now, if I wanted to go to New York City as often, it would cost me a couple $100 a month, which is ridiculous. So, So anyway, it was, at that time, it was still very inexpensive to go to the city. So I was there all the time. I was in Queens all the time. I was in parts of Manhattan all the time. So but I had this idea of, this was this expansive idea that I'm not going to let the external world make me afraid. I'm going to continue to move forward with and continue to enhance my experience and learn. And it was that summer that I had met Amma when she came to New York in July. I think that was when she usually would do her New York program. And when I initially met her, it's just hard to describe. When you meet somebody who's an actual master, just being in the same room with them does something to you energetically. And I can tell you, I mean, this is a lot of times how I judge. I don't judge it by, how interesting. I mean, people can write interesting books, they can say interesting things, and that's all well and good. That's great. People can have a lot of wisdom to share in that milieu. But when it comes down to it, it's like, what is experienced? If you tell me that this is a great healing modality, am I feeling anything from it, or was it just like, okay, that didn't do anything? I mean, potentially in that kind of a situation, something can be doing something, but you may not necessarily know. You don't always. Some things are more subtle. Let's put it that way. But when something really comes out to you, I just can't. I don't even know if I could describe to you the state I was in after I met her, because I had a friend who I worked with who was like, "Oh, you've really got to go meet her. You've got to go meet her." So I said, "Okay." And again, I go into these things with no. It's not necessarily that I'm skeptical, but I don't have any expectations. I'm like, this person could be an awesome person. This person could be great for that person, and for me, you just don't know. But I don't, if my intuition tells me, yeah, this is something worth doing, then usually I'll do it. And and the connection with her, I mean, you could literally, anytime I was in the room or near her, you feel things. You literally feel stuff going on energetically, and she's not doing anything. She's not saying anything to you. So I had taken mantra with her in that November. And after taking mantra, and of course, obviously can't tell people what your mantra is, but you take it and then you're taught how to use it. So I had been in a point where I was using the mantra quite regularly and everything, but there was a lot going on at my job at that point that was very chaotic. And, there was a lot of we know how it is in the workplace. There's unnecessary drama. There's people, acting out about things. And I was a union rep at the time. So when stuff was going wrong, between the county and the workers, I never heard the end of it. It was just, and I wasn't the only shop steward, but the other shop steward wasn't, I don't know, maybe she had it right. She wasn't as open to hearing some of this stuff. I listened to everybody, whether I could do anything for them or not. Okay. And so that was I remember it was a very difficult time. And again, I had been practicing meditation, and we all know about the things about meditation, about, one-pointed focus and, experiencing this idea of nothingness. I should also mention that around that time when I met my guru, one thing she will do, because obviously she's from India, is that a lot of Westerners, people like myself, would get, she would give them a spiritual name. Because when you do puja, usually one of the things they ask if you're doing puja in a temple is they will ask you your name and your ancestral name and your family name. And if you don't have one, then you just have to put like Shiva. You have some kind of a name that you put down. And so a lot of people, we have Western names and that's our name, right? But she will also, if you want, and if she's inclined to give it to you, she'll give you a spiritual name. And so somebody had said to me, "Oh, you should really go get a name from Mother." And I said, okay. So I had finished whatever, I was at the program, I think. This must have been in 2003. I was working. Was it that one? I'm trying to remember which one it was. I know it was in New York. It might have been. I don't think it was the first time I met her. I feel like it was the second time I met her. But anyway, I was in New York, and I had gone, and I had a friend who was running the name line. And she said, "Oh yeah, just sit here." And of course, it's always chaos right near the guru. Absolute chaos while she's doing her thing. And she will pay attention to you when she's ready. That's how they work. The idea is that they're getting rid of that idea of expectation and timing and things like that. So the guru will ignore you until she's ready, and it depends on how patient you are. So I remember there was a woman in front of me on the naming line, and I looked at her, and there's somebody, when they know that you're on the naming line, the person behind her stands there and they have a book of names, and they will write one down on a piece of paper. Now, what their criteria for writing it down is, not a clue. But they but they would hand the name to Amma, and if she agreed with the name they picked, she would just kind of put it here, and then she would hand it to the person. So that's what she did with this girl. And so they wrote her name down. She looked at it, took the name, she went like that. And then, so then the person went away. So then I went up, and it was my turn. Okay, and so I'm sitting next to her, and the people behind her have this book open, and they write a name down, and they hand the paper to her. She looks at the paper. She looks up at me, and she goes, "No." She just goes, "No, really," and then she turns to them and starts talking to them really fast in Malayali. Of course, I don't speak Malayali, so I was like, I don't know. And my friend over there was just sitting there going, "What the hell's going on?" Because she looked at me and she kept smiling at me, but then she would look back at them and she was like, no, scolding them, like, no, and so then they were like tearing the book apart. They wrote like 5 names down. I don't know what they wrote, but finally, she said, they handed her the names again, and she goes, "No." And so so now she's calmer, and she's going like this and like this and like that, and I don't know what she's saying. My friend told me later she was listing all the qualities that she wanted in the name. Like, no, these names don't have the right qualities. And finally she said something, then she said, "Nischala, Nischala," and she points at me and she says, "Nischala, Nischala." And then she grabs me by the face and she says, "Nischala." So, a big smile. So she was like, so that was the name that she gave me. And so the guy wrote the name down, and he says to me, "Nischala, not moving." And I was like, so I'm not saying I'm stubborn? I mean, I'm not moving, right? And so he's trying to explain it to me, and he says, "Oh, Mother's basically saying you are like God." I said, "Well, she tells everybody they're like that." So it's not, it's not anything special. But Nischala is, doing a little research on the name, it only appears if you look at the stotra that people recite. They'll recite the 1,000 names or the 108 names of a particular deity. And somebody said to me, "Oh, your name is Nalalita," which is the one that the big tantric one that's connected to Sri Lalita Devi. And I said, "No, it's not. That's Nishkala. Nishkala means without time, outside of time. Nischala means without movement. So it literally is the word for stillness. And the only deity that it is a name of is the goddess Kali, because it is in the Kali Sahasranama. That's the only place where that name shows up. And basically, so it's the idea of the opposite of it is chanchala, and chanchala is restlessness. And so, what's been said by the swamis and so forth, so they said if she gives you a name, the name has the qualities that you need to develop in yourself. Okay, that's the quality that she sees in you that's going to bring you success. So Nischala means, you are going to, oh, thank you. Knowledgeable about some things. I feel like I'm like this much on the iceberg, and there's this much more that I don't know. But there was, but the idea was that it was so Nischala, and it was like the idea that that by being still. Because, you hear me here in the mornings, I'm like, blah, 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 blah. My mouth is running, my mind is running all the time. And she's saying, it spiritually do really good for you to stop doing that. Like, to just be quiet. Now, again, stillness. That's something we can talk about, right? What does it mean to be still? So it had to, so after that, I remember I had, there was a university nearby me. Well, now it's a university. It used to be a college, and now it's a university. Everything becomes a university somehow. But in any case, they were a Catholic college that would have a labyrinth that they would put out, usually around Christmas, around Easter, and they had this one up through New Year's Eve. And I remember it was New Year's Eve that I went, and I want to say it was 2003. And this was one of those days at work. That's why I brought work up, was that, everybody was ticked because every office got to close early except the library. And people were getting angry because they're like, yeah, the library is like not important when it comes to raises and negotiations because you're just the library. But when it comes to staying open on New Year's Eve, apparently we're more important than the courthouse. So people were getting, kind of miffed about it. And, I can actually kind of understand that. So I had all of this stuff and like all of this this chaos. And I had been meditating with the mantra and so forth for, I forget how long at that point. And so I went to the labyrinth because I thought, okay, I'm going to go at lunchtime, so this will allow me to kind of like calm down, get in a centered space, like clear my mind. But as I was in the labyrinth, all I could do while I was trying to recite my mantra and all I could do was focus on this BS at work. And I was getting really frustrated because I was like, and finally I was just there and I was like, what is the point of all this? Why do I engage in all this spiritual practice? Like, where does it get me? Because at this point, even then, this was like 20 years ago, I'd already been practicing spiritual practices for a very, very long time, probably at least 15 years. And I was like, where is this getting me? Like, I feel like I'm just back in the same place all the time. I'm really pissed off. I was like, damn it. I was just like, and so, of course, I'm taught, you always talk to the guru. You always have this connection with the guru that's very hard to explain in the West, but there is always a connection there. And I was like, I really want to know, like, what the point is of all this. I don't know why I'm doing this. Okay. So I finished the labyrinth walk. I walked out, you write your name in a book, whatever, said goodbye to the lady at reception, walked out the door. And just as I was walking out towards the road, there was like a cemetery across the street, like a nun's cemetery, and then there was a parking lot down this way. And all of a sudden, I just stopped. And I'm not going to really be able to really explain to you very well what happened, because it's not... the only thing that really comes to mind is the metaphor of throwing pebbles into a pond. So it was almost the idea of seeing like a very still pool of water and having people like chuck rocks, and you watch the concentric circles go out, right? You watch it kind of do this. And for some reason, that image launched me into this state that is probably, in retrospect, it was probably the first time I experienced samadhi. Because, ask and you shall receive. I said, tell me what the point of this is. Okay, here it is. And it's a point of absolute stillness. It's a point of absolute stillness where you are in the middle of everything, and everything is kind of moving, like the world's moving around you. There's traffic out on the road. There's this going on. There's that. There's still all the crap going on at work. But now you shifted to a space of, it's almost like you're in this little quiet space and you can hear all the chaos around you. And something happens. I mean, Kundalini is definitely activated because you feel it. You feel like your whole spine is on fire. And it was just like, but it was just quiet. I think I had done a podcast on Teresa of Avila, and she talks about reaching the prayer of quiet. And she tries to say to people, like, listen, it doesn't have anything to do with your ears. It doesn't have anything to do with this. It doesn't have anything to do with what you see. It's just, and I understood what she was talking about. You reach this point of like absolute, and in that space, it's like you just suddenly know what it means for everything to just be. It's not like you're trying to, control or make things happen, or even what the whole wheel of samsara means, because when you're at that center there, you're recognizing that you're on a wheel. And think about it, if you get on a wheel, you get dizzy and you get drained and you get dragged around and around. And yeah, we're all on the wheel, but you have to recognize, you have to kind of go with the wheel. You're playing the game. When you're in the center, that's when you recognize that everything is, and I don't like to make judgment words, but everything is for a reason. And, or everything is because it is the way it's supposed to be. And I know that's really a hard thing to say in a world where everybody's divided and we say, no, this is not right. Yes, we participate in the world and we try to change it, right? But that's part of the game. And if you look back in history, there's always been that game. There's been a different version of that game, but there's always been that game. And we all have different roles. It's like playing poker. We all have a different hand. We have all different things that we're dealt. But you're in this space and you realize everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. It's that moment of stillness. And at that point, going back to work and everything, it was like everything at work, it was like it didn't matter now, because you could look at people and you could just look at, it just sounds weird, but it's almost like you look at people with wonder about the fact that they're playing the game this way and that they're playing it as good as they are. And so, I don't know, I went back and I don't know what had changed about my face, but the people who were very, very grumpy, their face suddenly changed when they would look at me. And they would start to smile, like not in a smirking kind of a way, but it was like, I don't know, there was just something that had changed. And that is something that's very difficult to explain. It's something that I had to experience. And I have experienced it since then. And you can't make it happen. It happens when it wants to. When I was teaching library school, I used to teach at Rutgers University when I was a professional cataloger. One of my students, who was in my class, she was really nice, Indian young woman, and she would drive me. My car was in a parking lot, and nothing's close at Rutgers, so I had to park in some lot over. She says, "Oh, let me drive you over to your car." So I would go with her because she knew I was very much involved with this, and she liked to talk about it. And sometimes I would tell her about some of these things. And I remember saying to her, I said, sometimes I don't feel like I deserve to have these experiences. She says, "Oh, well, grace isn't about merit." Former skills grad. Wow, yep. That's where I taught. I taught for 7 years. I taught at Skills. 7 or 8 years, I think, from 2003 to 2010. I think I taught at Skills. I might have taken a year off in between, but yeah, wow. So yeah, the librarians are all here. So, but I remember her telling me that. So it was, and her saying that, she says, "Well, grace is one of those things that's not." She calls that an act of grace, and she said that has nothing to do with what's earned. Because ultimately it's not really about what we think of as moral. It's kind of like, oh, I think I'm going to take these 5 steps, and that's going to get me to where I want. It's about yielding control. And the card that I had gotten today when I was pulling my things, just to kind of tie it in with this, was the grasping card. And it's the idea that when we start looking at things, when we start trying to assess and evaluate and look at numbers and do different things and say, oh, well, I did better this month. I should have done better this month. I should have increased this month. I mean, this is the way business works, right? This is the way you do things. How am I going to increase my earnings? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And really what seems like a very revolutionary is just do your thing every day. Just do your thing every day and see what comes. I've had some clients recently where it's interesting that they were very, very highly intuitive people, but when they would, every time somebody would tell them, no, you can't do it this way, you must do it this way and follow these steps, they said they always failed at what they were doing. When they just listened to what their intuition said and let things come to them, things happened the way they were supposed to. We just have a hard time doing that because we can't let go of things. So it's like talking about letting go and talking about the things, but it's easy to talk about, but it's almost like the experience has to happen because, I can talk about it here over and over and over again, but once something happens and it shifts in you like that, once you feel it in the body, once you feel it once you know it, you feel its effect on you, that's when the change can happen but the thing is, the frustrating part is that you can't make it happen, okay? So very, 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 very interesting. Okay, so let's do our reading for today since we're just about at 7 o'clock. And actually it's weird. That was not the topic I was really intending to talk about today, but somehow that's where I went. So apparently that's what I needed to say today, was about that. Maybe it's also a reminder for me, because when I start getting caught up in stuff that's going on around me, it's kind of like, step back and recognize that everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. And and again, when you start looking at it in terms of individual things that may be going on socially, politically, or wherever, we may say, well, no, things aren't right. But remember, we come from a system that says that we come from a system that tells us that everything needs to be corrected. As I said, the West has I'm going to call it the biblical mythology that says this, this world is the way it is as a result of sin, and that now nature is corrupted and we need to fix everything. And the Eastern view of that would be like, no, it's not corrupted at all. You just need to work in harmony with what's there, and that's not easy for us to do because we all feel that we all focus on our individual power, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, we all do have individual power. We all have unique things that we have to offer the world, but we also are part of a system. And again, to kind of move with where that system goes. Another Alan Wattsism. He's just like, you get in the boat, and if you're clever, you let the wind take you where you're going to go. You don't sit there and try to force yourself to go in a particular direction. You see where you get taken. So anyway, so let me look at our reading for today. So our first card, interestingly, is the Four of Pentacles, and this is so funny because I was talking about grasping. It's the Miser card. This is another one of those really unpleasant cards in this deck, because you see this woman who's just like, she's built into a wall, and she has all of her possessions, and she's making this very sour face. And so that's literally the card that comes to my mind when I think of grasping, because if you look at it in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, you see the guy, and he's got the pentacle like this, and he's got his feet on top of the other ones. I'm hanging on to the thing that I've got. So this is definitely a card of grasping. So that's kind of the central image there. And what the miser card means, it doesn't mean that we're being misers. It means that we are so afraid of letting go and letting things go through that we end up making ourselves small. We end up being stuck in a particular place because we think, oh no, this is what I need to maintain control of what I'm doing. So the miser is always, I think the meaning in this deck is kind of like, well, what is it that what is the need to hang on to something so tightly? Okay. And again, practical concerns understood. Sometimes, the way to move forward is to yield and to let go of some of that. Now, our inner feeling of which we're unaware, can I make this up? No-thingness, right? Was I just talking about this at the beginning of this live stream? No thing. No-thingness is what's going on inside. And no-thingness is, that idea of being in the gap, okay? For those of you just joining, and hello and welcome, we were just talking, I was literally just talking about the way that one has to experience certain things. Talking about it is not really good enough, but I was talking a little bit about no-thingness, and then the card I'm getting here is no-thingness, because no-thingness is just about not, when we're talking about ultimate reality or ultimate consciousness, we're not talking about a thing, okay? When you're talking about even the concept of God, you're not talking about a thing. You're not talking about something that can be weighed, measured, and tested. It's not a thing, okay? We're talking about something that's probably more about akin to consciousness. But no-thingness as the inner feeling that's going on, the fact that this card, this is actually the Hierophant card, the fact that it's completely black is because there's this sense of not being able to see your way forward. It's like, okay, you are between, again, it's a liminal space between something old and something new, and that's a scary place to be sometimes, because there's just no thing. There's nothing you're striving for. There's no goal. There's nothing that you're pushing towards. There's just no thing, right? And so you have this as the inner feeling, but the external feeling is we have this Five of Swords energy, which has been coming up quite a lot this week. And this is the comparison card. So as you can see, you have this tree that's probably, I don't know what kind of tree it's supposed to be, but it's next to a stalk of bamboo. And it's as though one's comparing itself to the other, like, oh, I should be more like the other, but you're not. This is a stalk of bamboo, and this is some other kind of tree, maybe an oak tree or something like that. I don't know, but they're not the same thing. So the idea is that you are not like other people, and so that comparison is that idea of, oh, I didn't earn as much as that channel. Oh, I didn't do as much as this. Oh, I didn't do as much as that. Well, you're not that person. And that person's doing it their own way. And we always seem to feel like we have to keep improving. We're doing it wrong. We have to do it better. I have to do it like that person, or that person's better at it than me. There's a lot of this energy that goes on. And it makes us, and a lot of it is about control, because we feel like we don't want to, we feel like the things that are familiar and the things that we feel that we have or that were successful for us in the past are the things that we feel like we have to hang on to, right? So the advice card here is the intensity card. This is actually the Knight of Wands. And is it the Knight of Wands, or is it the Page of Wands? No, it's the Page of Wands, I think. So it's, the intensity card. And so this gets back to the idea that sometimes when we are, so if you're in the gap, let's just give an example. If you have left a job and now you're gung-ho about getting into a business, or you've left a relationship and you're like, okay, I want to show I've recovered and I'm going to get back out there and meet somebody else, or whatever the situation is. It's basically saying, there's an intensity there. There's a fire. You're fired up to do something. But the problem is that it's almost like you're on fire kind of in place. Okay? You're not moving, or the way forward is not apparent. So that's a real challenge that we have when we are when we know that we need to move on to the next thing, when we're ready to, we're making our plans, we're laying our plans, we're ready to take action, we're ready to go on to the next thing, but circumstances around us, it's just not clear what the path, even if we have a plan, there may be things thwarting our path forward, and you kind of go, well, okay, well, or again, like if you're trying to meet somebody, maybe you're just not meeting people you resonate with, or if you are starting a new business, maybe you're not getting the clientele that you want, because you generally don't right away. You generally have to give things time, and certainly certain things you almost have to wait for opportunities, which again, we don't think that way. We say, no, you have to go out and go out and grab it. And it's like, well, again, so if you're going to keep doing this grasping, it's saying, do you really need to do that? So there's often an intensity of energy, and the key is, where are you going to put that energy? If you can't if you can't do something right now, if there's something that you want to do and you can't do it right now, then then really what I've seen the best way to use that energy is to kind of go back and clean up what's not finished. Okay, we all have stuff that's unfinished, and sometimes we're not moving ahead because we haven't really finished what's gone on before. And maybe it's stuff we're avoiding for a lot of reasons, but maybe it's like, okay, well, attend to those details, get those things. It's as I think as Ralph Blum had once said, if the fishermen can't go to sea, they repair nets. Okay, because you can't always. It's not always the conditions are not always right for you to do what you want to do. So in that case, then it's like, okay, well, let's settle the old business so that we're clear to move into the new. Because even as something ends, there's always loose ends to be tied up, right? So sometimes we have to put our energy into that, organizing and maybe brainstorming. Brainstorming too. I mean, you can write down a lot of ideas. You can come up with a lot of things, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to use all those ideas. But sometimes this is another way to spend your energy, to channel it into something where you feel like you're working towards that change as you're waiting for the conditions to be right for it. And sometimes you've got to be open too, because sometimes maybe we want to move in a certain direction, and to get where we want to, maybe that's not the right thing that we're doing. So the outcome card, this is the Eight of Swords in this one, is the guilt card. Okay, that's a rather creepy card. But Eight of Swords, yeah, that's the idea of mentally boxing yourself in. And guilt means beating yourself up for not doing it right. I didn't do it right. I didn't do this the right way. I made a mistake. I should have done it this way. And what this is saying is, it's perfectly okay to not do it right. Because I've just said before, to a certain degree, everything is as it's supposed to be. Or not, when we play the game, we don't always play it. You win some and you lose some, right? You try a certain strategy and say, okay, that one doesn't work. But again, it's a game. The results can vary. Your strategy that didn't work last time may work another time. Or maybe you've just decided, okay, I've tried this strategy enough and it's time to think of a new one. But there's definitely this sense of needing to let go, not to limit ourselves, because these are both cards of limitation. Okay, these are swords. They're both cards of limitation. And but the limitation is often coming from us. We are telling ourselves that we're not good enough, that we can't do it, that we're not going to succeed like this person or like that person, or I'm never going to meet anybody again, or it's all this kind of thing. And it's because and this is often happening because there's just this excess of energy where we are ready to launch into something, but it's a question of how we use that energy, rather than using it, draining yourself mentally by thinking about all the places where you think you're falling short. Sometimes it's good to evaluate what you have going for you. And also to acknowledge that some things take time. Sometimes you can't, as much as you want something to happen today. And sometimes, if you're in business for yourself, maybe you're like, well, yeah, I need to have this money if I want to keep things going. It's surprising how, I go through this almost every month, because I do teach, but I'm also this is a time when I'm totally reliant on clientele and on business, because my day job doesn't start up again until, day job, so to speak, W-2 job, it doesn't start up again until September. So I'm very reliant on that, but it's just really weird how all of a sudden money will just start coming in from somewhere. if you just leave the situation alone and just keep doing what I'm doing every day, then all of a sudden, like, new clients will pop up out of nowhere and certain things will happen. And, it's not something you can predict at the beginning of the month. But by the end of the month, you look and you go, oh, okay, it'll be fine. And eventually, you just keep working. You just keep plodding along and not being impatient for the result there. So this is really about releasing guilt, not comparing yourself, not always grasping for things, because when we grasp, we are, again, it goes back to control. We don't know how to let go of the situation. It's almost like the universe has to step in and take control away, or surrendering, which is a really hard thing to do. You might say, oh, okay, I surrender to the universe, and but then we don't. Then we spend the next day going, oh yeah, okay, I surrender, but like, how am I going to manage this? And how am I going to, we don't really fully surrender to things. I think we're really just about out of time, but I am going to pull a Between Worlds card, being we're talking about this in-between space. And the card that flipped over today is Vexation. Okay? And let me tell you what that card means, because this is a fairly new system for me, so I don't have all these memorized. Okay. There might be some seemingly high-stakes decisions to make here, leaving you feeling trapped in the mind. Hello? But beyond the endless thought loops, there is indeed somewhere a place of clarity. Pay close attention to the surrounding cards. Well, we've looked at this. Is it a choice you need to make with your head, your gut, or your heart? What feels right at this moment? Plan just the next step. Okay? So yeah, there's the reminder too to kind of stay in the present with this stuff too, because we get that frustration when we're trying to be somewhere that we're not. So yeah, interesting. So I often find that when I do these, that this is advice that's coming up for. I mean, it may apply to me, but I feel like it also applies to people who are watching. That for whatever reason, that's what people may need to hear today. So that's it for me today. Thank you guys all so much for joining me. I'm always appreciate when you are, people can join me live. I mean, I can record it and people can watch it later, but it's always cool when I have people on who are live. So it's very accurate in my world. Thank you so much. Oh, you're welcome, and I'm very glad that it is. I'm glad that it resonates, because it's hoping. I did a reading for Gemini this week on my channel, and I remember reading it and I was going, I feel like this is like for one person. But then all the Geminis who I know were like, no, it actually did apply to me. So I'm like, okay, then great. I'm saying something that I think might be limited, but it's not. So anyway, thank you guys again so much. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. And I will be here again tomorrow morning. So hope to see you then. And again, of course, recordings always available if you want to see the rest of it. Instagram and then YouTube later this morning on the Liminal Tarot channel. Thank you so much, and you all have a great day.